G'day. Welcome to the Agricoach podcast for families on the land who want to grow their family's wealth and prosperity across the generations. I'm your host, Ben Law, and I'm the financial bloke. G'day. Welcome back to the Agricoach Wealth and Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Ben Law, the financial bloke. Today's episode is one you won't want to miss. We're diving into the journey of the Penfold family, the owners of Four Daughters Beef, a family-run operation in Western Queensland. As a family, they're a pretty amazing bunch. They fly planes, they fly helicopters, they run a 5,000-head feedlot, and they have their own beef brand, Four Daughters. If you haven't seen them out there, check them out on social media. It's a bloody good story. Joining me today is Karen Penfold, the matriarch of the family, who alongside her husband Dan leads a team that includes their four driven and motivated daughters, Bonnie, Molly, Jemima and Matilda, in managing this dynamic and growing enterprise. Karen and Dan's story is one of hard work, strategic thinking, taking risks, and an unwavering commitment to family. It's about family alignment, taking risks and making intentional choices to ensure their family relationships remain strong and their family legacy endures. In this episode, Karen and I will discuss how their business evolved and where they are today, why she and Dan continue to push the boundaries instead of just opting for an easier life, the strategic initiatives they've implemented to ensure family harmony and business success, including the creation of a family-led roadmap, family meetings, communication, education and practice, and aligning their professional advisors. And perhaps more importantly, Karen's straight shooting advice for parents in their 40s and 50s preparing themselves, the business, and the next generation to step in. So grab a cuppa and join me as we explore the Penfold story. Well, without further delay, Karen, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Ben, for having me.
Loving it. Been looking forward to this one for a while. So, Karen, 2024 was a really big year for the Penfold clan. You kicked a huge number of business goals, which I'm sure we'll get into. But more importantly, you increased the size of the clan with Molly marrying Tom early back in 2024. And then the greatest news, which was on New Year's Day, young Wally, your first grandchild, was born and he joined the family, which was just amazing. It must be exciting for you. But where I want to start, Karen, is to go back to the beginning, and we'll get to Wally when we get to the end. But can you go back and sort of tell us how you and Dan first came together in the family business and sort of take us through a bit of a timeline to where you are today and who's who in the zoo?
Thanks, Ben. Reflecting is always an interesting thing to do. To go back, at the beginning, I suppose, we were married in 1995, and at that stage I did move onto the family property with Dan. A lot in our era will remember, like we actually started living in a caravan outside the main house, and we were there for a few months while we then also, picked up an old cottage from another place that had no windows or doors, and we sort of made that into a home. And, we worked in Dan's family business. We had 4 children over the next 10 years. Got to do the maths here. And in 2005, 2006, we did actually leave the family business and began our own journey. That probably has been sort of the catalyst for everything we've done now in hindsight for the last 19 years. Leaving a family business was a really tough decision, and it was a really hard time for everybody. But even in reflecting on that, Dan was turning 36 that year. He'd been striving hard, working hard. He had lots of dreams. He's a big thinker, and he, 36, 4 small children, a wife, and he just wanted to get ahead, drive the ship, and he is a pusher, always has been. So it sort of became evident that it was time for us to do our own thing, and in that time, as we said, it was really, really challenging to get to that point. Still really hard for everyone, even in that reflection phase, but I suppose that was the absolute key for us to start thinking about our own family and how we were going to manage our transition in sort of 20 years' time. And strangely, Ben, 20 years' time's moved on, and we're sort of, the girls are 10 years short of that, but I suppose that really is our driver, that we're fully aware that by the time they're, early 30s to mid-30s, they need to be rowing their own boat. And Dan and I have always been very much of the belief that we don't want to drive this ship for the rest of our lives. Like, he wanted that opportunity and to achieve his own dreams and goals. And we're really conscious that we know that when the girls are sort of that mid-30s, they also need their own opportunity. Yeah, I suppose we're on succession round number 2. We've learnt from 1 and we're just continuing to try to learn and learn and learn, to do this as best we can, because we fully acknowledge it is not easy. It's the toughest gig and it's the hardest thing that, our family will face. So we're trying all we can to be really proactive in this space.
So when you and Dan decided to step out of the family business, you said Dan was 36, 4 children, 4 girls who, just by the way, the Bulls stamped those really clearly. They all are such different personalities, but they all look very similar to each other. How old were you at that stage, Karen? So Dan was 36?
Yeah, I'm a year younger, so 35.
Was that a big thing for you and Dan? Like, obviously Dan was pretty motivated. Were you sort of standing beside him and saying, righto, let's take this risk? Because it is a big thing to step out with 4 young kids.
Oh, definitely. Look, we'd run the race. There was just so much emotion and it was really hard. It was really, really hard. It was just time for it had run out, I suppose, and, lots of talking and lots of conversations and emotions just wear out. So the best choice really for everyone was to make the hardest decision, Ben. It is the toughest thing, but I think you get to a point where you go, that's it. We're not doing this anymore. We have to make some decisions, and a bit like anything, you might have 1 step back for 3 steps forward. There comes a point, I think, the decisions just have to be made, and that's where I suppose we'd got to in our space. And the challenge is in families, everyone is at different phases in their life. There can be other siblings who aren't where you're at. There's no right or wrong. I think that's, in reflecting, we know that. It's just trying to make the best decision you can for your family. And Ben, as you say, it's become even more real in the last 2 weeks because now Molly's and Tom have welcomed Wally into the world, and the hard truth for them is hit that, wow, they now have their family, and you can see that that's their nucleus. So we said we're seriously living it. And I feel like we literally are. We're hitting round 2, and we hope we're hitting round 2 running by doing what we've been doing over the last 12 months and really trying to grab the bull by the horn, so to speak. I mean, we've done everything we felt we could do for the last 20 years. I would say we've been in succession. We've spent so much time in structures, in asset purchases, in trying to make sure that one day when we, look to split this, that we've set the structures up to try to make it as simple. That's a very big word. We know it won't be simple, but, that's sort of based every decision over the last 20 years as well. So we sort of got to a point, girls are growing, first wedding, baby, and it's like, righto, where does this next phase go?
So you've got Bonnie, 27?
Yep, so we go, Bonnie will be 27 in 3 weeks' time. Molly's turned 25. Jemima will turn 23 in about 6 weeks' time. And Matilda turns 21 in a week. No, less than a week, in a few days. So we also got another celebration. So, yeah, so they're all 2 years apart, and they're all sort of 8 weeks within 2 years apart. So I am a school teacher, so, I was pretty keen to have kids at the beginning of the year and the time. So
well planned out.
So that's it. We didn't plan the 4 girls, but, that's our gift.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things is like they're right at that right stage now, aren't they? Now, they're all different personalities, but just for everyone listening, you run all the properties you've got in Western Queensland. You've got about anywhere from 4 to 4,500 head of cattle on feed at any given time. And all the kids are basically, and when I say kids, I mean the next generation, the girls are back on farm working in the farming business, aren't they?
They are, Ben. They all obviously went to boarding school in Brisbane like, so many bush kids did. But they are, all 4 of them, that's the irony, just have the land in their blood. And no matter what we do, they just all want to be back on the land, which as parents we have a choice that we either sort of say no, go away, or we help them achieve their goals. And that's probably where we've been at. Like, we have encouraged them all to, after they finish school, we did try to encourage them all to go and do something. They have all studied, but they all had a gap year. They've all done really interesting things in that period of time. And then they've all studied. So Bonnie did actually go back to Brisbane to UQ, and she just said, I can't do this. I don't want to be back in the city. I need to be back in the bush. So it was like, righto, work out what you can do externally. So, yeah, they've all then pretty much followed that path, that they've all studied externally, and they've studied externally full-time. When I say full-time, they've done a full load. They've actually worked most of the days, and then they have to say to their father, hang on, I've got uni and subjects to squeeze in here somewhere. So feedlotting's been absolutely brilliant for that because, they can get up, sort of work half a day, feed cattle, and then they'd study. So Bonnie did primary teaching, Molly did accounting, Jemima finished ag business, and Matilda's actually has done private pilot's license, and then she's done her helicopter theory, so she's really interested in the flying space. So, yeah, they're all back here. Everyone probably gets this wrong, we don't all live in the same house. I have to clarify that because it's sort of like, oh, my goodness. No, so our rules when Bonnie did come home was, no, she couldn't live in the house with us, so she had to live in a building outside. So we all live in the same vicinity, or we did, but last year we bought another place, so Bonnie's sort of 25 k's away and Molly's 40 k's away, and Jemima and Matilda are still here, but again, they live in another building on the place. So we very much also, we do so much as a family, but we're also conscious of making sure that everyone has their space when they need it as well.
Boundaries.
Yeah.
You've worked bloody hard to build a profitable, scalable and well-run operation. But now, as your children are finishing their education and starting to take an interest in the family business, you're realising it's time to shift focus. It's no longer just about farm prosperity. It's now about family prosperity. You need to align your family, start preparing the next generation, improve communication and strengthen family relationships. Now, of course, that's easier said than done. And that's why we created the High Performing Families Workshop, to guide families through this crucial transition. Want to know more? Head over to www.agricoach.com.au/take action. Now, let's head back to the episode.
Very much so.
So, like if I look at your situation, Karen, you and Dan are in your 50s now, so you're in what we call the acceleration phase, which I'll talk about in a minute, but also the girls are in that heavy apprenticeship phase. So I usually say from the day they hit the ground, like young Wally, until they hit about 28 years of age, roughly is the apprenticeship phase. That's where they come back and learn all the skills, start to learn not only the operational skills on farm, but also the business management, the leadership, the communication, how to build trust, etc. And then mum and dad are usually, if they're in their 50s, in, as I said, the acceleration phase, which is usually we've spent 20, 30 odd years worth of time building our equity, learning how to run a business really, really well. And this is the time when everything accelerates. And I look at you guys over the last sort of 4 or 5 years and the plans you've got ahead for the next 2 or 3 years, you're definitely in that acceleration phase. How big an impact has that been having 4 girls, or how much of an influence, especially for Dan, has it been having 4 girls coming back and saying, hey, Dad, we love the bush, we want to be involved, let's go?
Massively. You know, Molly even, she went overseas actually and taught water skiing for her in a summer camp actually for her gap year, and came back and said, right, let's get that other feedlot going because I'm not going away to uni. I'm going to study externally and I'm staying here. And you're like, really sure about that? And she said, look, I'll even buy the office donga that we can study in. Like, she was that determined, like, no, I'm staying. So it was like, right, are you sure? Definitely. Okay, so let's, we have had 2 feedlots, so let's get the other one cracking again. It's the driver of everything we do, really. Dan is driven excessively probably, but the 4 girls, it's genetics, I suppose. They're tarred with the same brush. Their passion's huge. Like, this is what they want to do. They can't sit in the house. They don't know how to sit still. And every day, they're out. Like, Jemima's on a dozer today. She's like on a D11. Bonnie's been mixing. Matilda's been loading trucks. Then she's gone fixing something. I can't even tell you. They're all out and about. So, that is, I suppose, that very much drives us, that we know that if we want to support their dreams, I suppose Dan's loved living on the land. We've just valued raising our own children. And as we talk about values, Ben, like, it's just living on the land instills incredible values. It instills incredible work ethic. And we've got to say, we had 4 children. They happen to be girls. That's sort of the end of that story. They were raised to work. So it didn't really matter that you had a pink shirt on, or when you were small you had a fairy skirt on actually and little plastic high heels. Anyone will remember that running through feedlot pens. It was irrelevant. There was jobs to be done. And I think the biggest gift you can give your children is a work ethic. I think it sets them up for life. And then a work ethic on the land also teaches them massive resilience, because every single day you can be guaranteed something will break, break, go wrong. It's just a sure thing. So, the kids innately, as you say, in their apprenticeship, they learn to work and they learn resilience. And we've just made that choice. If they're so passionate that, we're prepared to do all we can as parents to pull together as a team, and they're very aware that it makes a team. Like, if they want to be here, we've all got to pull together. Most people struggle for staff. I suppose we can say we've bred them.
Well, now you're marrying them. Now you're bringing young Tom back in and got Wally. You're breeding the next lot of workers.
Yeah. we've got the staff that want to work. So, that's normally everyone else's problem, whereas we've got a solution there. So, yeah, let's just give it all we can, which I suppose, and that's the drive. Our family is everything, and while they're passionate about it, we're prepared to give it all we can.
And it's interesting because the one about raising girls was quite interesting because, as everyone knows, I've got Sophie, my one and only little daughter. And I remember when I first met you and Dan and you came into the office that we had there, and remember they had the dongers that have been converted into offices within the building. It's quite snazzy. And I remember Dan was walking around looking at them and the girls were looking at them, checking them all out and how they'd been done. And I looked over at Dan and I just smiled and said, looks like you've created yourself a job for when you get home. You're going to have to build these girls some offices. And he looked at me like I was like a complete alien. He's gone, I'm not doing it. They'll do it. And next thing you know, one of the girls walked in. I think it might have been Jemima. I can't remember, but walked in with a tape measure and they're measuring it up. And he's like, yeah, they'll go down there. They'll build them if that's what they want to build. And you can just see that you and Dan have, again, we're not going into this at all, but you've just treated them like just a normal human being. This is your opportunity. Get out there, make the most of it and work hard and be resilient and also look after your family. That's the other thing that came through. So you can really see that there's no excuses is what I've noticed with them. It's like if you want something enough and you're willing to do the work, go out and get it. Don't make excuses. And I can't say I've ever seen anyone in the family ever make an excuse about anything, anywhere, anytime.
No, Ben, I'll share one little amazing experience with anyone, and because they've always just worked and they didn't get paid. It was just a part of a roof over your head. I can't remember what age they were, but they were still young. I don't know, 14, 12, 10, 8. I'm not sure. They were about that period in their life. And, well, Dan and I weren't in the yards, put it that way. So the four of them were, in duck cattle, so the yards were full. Matilda was small. Anyhow, it must have been a week of work or whatever, and we never paid them. If we did pay them, it wasn't very much. We got to the end of the week and we sort of put, I think it was $100 in the middle of the table. And we said, right, here's what we're going to pay you for your work. You've all done a great job. However, said you haven't all pulled the weight equally. Like some of you have worked better than others, but you know who that was. So we're going to leave you solve how much you think each person's worth.
That sounds like the Hunger Games, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not just $25 each. You've got to work out who actually was worth whatever. Anyhow, still can't remember, but they all solved it, no arguments, and we've always had that. They worked out then from that. But I think after that day, every single girl has always pulled their weight. There's like no one will think I'll have a bit of a slower day today. Like it's like, no, sorry, buddy. Like, you're working. It's all in.
You've got to get it done, yeah. And how do you see your role, Karen, in the business? Because obviously I watch from outside, you see Dan, who's, as you said, who's a big thinker and he's pretty driven in his vision. And you can just see sitting there going, I've got these 4 daughters coming back or the next generation coming through. I got to create something enough to be able to make enough space for them. And as you said, you've got the 2 feedlots. How do you fit into this whole, I hesitate to say circus, let's say show?
It's a big question. I don't know. You see those things. What's the role of the mother? Oh, my heavens. The list seriously is way too long. It's massive. Call me in the office side, HR, finance, all of that. But at the end of the day, it's very hard actually for the teacher role not to come out in you even as a mother, because I've never solved their problems. Like if they ask me something, I answer with a question. Ask a question, I'll put the question back that they've got to solve. So I suppose we've probably just our way of raising has always been to make them think and make them responsible. So I don't know, what's my role? Family harmony, what do mothers try to do? Everything. I don't know. Make everyone aware of, we're also very aware of our impact on each other. Like the girls are incredibly in tune with each other, insanely in tune with each other. They are each other's best buddies. They work. They want to get work done. Holy geez, they punch it out. So I suppose, my role has just been that role model, that person that also, we're very open, we communicate really well, and if someone does have a challenge, we'll talk. So I suppose we really want to just make sure family is first. So role probably is as much as we work hard and we do all that, we said make sure you look after each other, whatever we're doing, and make sure we also have fun. So I don't know, my role, it's hectic, it's busy, it's never dull. It's never the same. So, no, really, I suppose blessed to be the mother of 4 girls and, wife of Dan and be on the crazy journey that we're on, just to, try to keep feeding the nation, really. They want to feed. They want to grow food. So we have to keep going. They want to grow food, so let's back them.
One of the things that you just said there I want to jump into, Karen, is you said about the girls, they've always got each other's back, etc. But that doesn't mean they always get along, do they? And there's still going to be spats and disagreements and people want to go different directions. So it's not like it's just everyone sitting around singing Kumbaya and dad's hugging everyone, telling everyone it's okay and we're all going on the journey. Like there is conflict, isn't there?
Yeah, look, we love a vigorous debate, that's also totally expected. And we also want people to challenge each other's thoughts and processes and say, well, I disagree, or, and we're happy to disagree. We have learnt the skills, I suppose, over time that we don't yell. We can disagree and we'll talk through it and, move on. Their perception's amazing that if they know someone is getting a bit stressed or whatever, they'll go, righto, off you go and do whatever. We've got this. That's probably the thing that we see as parents is pretty amazing, that it's like, righto, they'll see from each other if someone needs a break or step away or, you go and do whatever by yourself today. You need to work alone. The others will work as the team today. So that's probably where that really comes in. And, they know on days when they've all got to pull together, they will pull together.
Get the job done. The interesting part is, though, is there doesn't seem to be the carryover resentment, which you see in a lot of families, when they do have discussions. And I know, talking from myself, in my family when I grew up, one of the problems is that nobody ever had any arguments. Nobody ever challenged anyone. It was just this, we don't want disagreement. It's all got to be happy. And then ultimately that was very toxic to everyone. And so what I'm trying to teach Sophie is it's okay to have a level of conflict and learn how to deal with that. And I think you guys have done that really well. And I've watched you do it over time, is have the robust conflict. And I've seen the girls challenge Dan, and I've seen you challenge Dan. I've seen Dan challenge you, and it's all been challenged around in a very respectful but strong way. And I don't see anyone carry away this resentment or bitterness to come back later and have the desire. That's what I seem to know about you guys is, I wouldn't say water off a duck's back, but people sort of respect each other enough to be able to let them have their opinion and not necessarily take it on board and then carry it around later on, which means that the team still stays strong.
There's definitely no wilting violets amongst us, and everyone will stand up for themselves and they'll say what they think. But that's exactly it. Like, we don't let anything drag on. And Ben, that goes back again to when they were little and parenting, that, if there's disagreement, we actually just didn't allow arguments or fighting. It just wasn't an option. Like, sort it out between the two of you, or we'll sort it out and it's over and let's move on. Okay, we've had a disagreement. That's called life. Next step forward, let's roll on. And we just didn't allow it, and they've learnt that from little, I suppose. I know people might say that's a strange thing to say, but I can genuinely say it has worked. It wasn't a part of how we've communicated, I suppose. Also, not saying, it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination, exactly as you say. It never will be, I suppose. It's an awareness that we just have to keep working on, and that's just human nature.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember one of the key things that Artie Lord from Lord Pastoral said to me when I was talking to him at Beef Week. One of the key things he said I'd recommend to families is never walk away from a family disagreement. Like, always, if you walk away because it gets heated and it's not productive, walk away, but never walk away permanently and not discuss it. You've got to come back to the table and have those discussions. And I think that's a really difficult thing to do for most families, because when you've got families in business, you've got business stuff, you've got family stuff, the lines blur, and next thing you're down the yards having a disagreement over something, and then it comes back and it's sitting at the kitchen table for dinner that night or somewhere on the weekend. So it's a good skill and a good bit of advice from Artie, but something that's hard sometimes to implement.
It is, but so far we've managed to keep that communication open. And I think even sort of that, spending this last 12 months, we've just, communication is just highlighted again. It is actually the number one key of all of this. No matter, we can have every business plan, we can have every structure, we can, have everything. But if we don't communicate as a family and be so aware of where everyone's at, it'll all fall over. Not just one of you being aware, like making sure everyone's aware. And when everyone is aware, we don't have anyone that walks away, and haven't got to that point, Ben. So let's just keep working that we keep communicating. I suppose, Dan and I probably had that in round one. And I suppose, I guess we say because of that again has just helped us be very clear in how we want to manage our next generation, which is, communication it's everything plus more.
So do you think you, in a family, you can drive a business really hard, really work hard, really drive the business, take on a lot of risk and take on some big goals, and at the same time still keep strengthening family relationships?
Well, look, that's our goal. We absolutely hope to, 110%. But we know exactly right. The only way of strengthening that relationships is everyone's got to be on the same page. A bit like, your plan, everyone understands the plan. If someone doesn't understand the plan, it's a challenge. I think we've also learned one or two people having a conversation about ideas doesn't work. Like, we've all got to be there. We've all got to know what's going on. If every single person is there, we've got ownership, we've got value, and it's so much easier to drive forward when everyone's on the same page.
And everyone can have their say.
And everyone can have their say in a respectful manner. As you have seen, we'll go, well, actually, no, I disagree with that. And we can actually quite happily say that around a table. Like someone might say, I think X, Y, Z. And, amongst us, we will go, no, well, I disagree. And somebody else will go, yeah, well, I do too. Or we can do that. So I think we can drive it. Obviously it's our hope and our goal. Yes, we do want to drive this forward. But most important among all of it is family relationships. And I know Dan is 110% on that, because he's sort of like, well, the day that family relationships do suffer, well, that will be the day when we potentially have to pull out the big axe sooner rather than later and make some hard decisions. But if we can keep communicating, we hope to transition in a civilised way that supports everybody on their goals and dreams for their families going forward.
And it's interesting, the stats show somewhere around 2/3 of the reason successions or transitions of wealth from one generation to other is based on failed communication, then a breakdown in trust. And so the more you increase communication skills, the higher levels of trust kick in and the worse it gets. And communication is not just one of those things that you can learn once and then stop. It's a skill that you have to keep practicing. I often sort of explain to families it's like running a marathon. You can't wake up one day, go to the gym, run on the treadmill for half an hour and say, right, I'm ready to run a marathon. It takes training and consistency. And just because you've run one marathon and you don't train again doesn't mean you're going to be able to run another one. So it's this consistent focus on communication. And I just look at it, it's the low-hanging fruit for most families, is if most succession plans or family businesses break down is because people aren't equipped with the skills to communicate well, then why wouldn't you start right there? Like that's the low-hanging fruit in the scenario. And, get the skills, because nobody's born a good communicator. That's the thing. They're either born into a family that communicates well and they pick up that programming, shall we say, or they learn it somewhere out there, good or bad. And I think that that's the one thing I've noticed about you guys is you get the fact that communication and trust is so important. So therefore, we have to allocate time to actually practice that skill.
Yeah, look, and I think, as you say, amongst us, it's become innate to this point. However, we're taking it to the next level by really, getting to that formalised business structure, I suppose, with strategic plans and meetings. And probably the first time in our life we're actually really aware of it as a tool, I suppose. It's something we just did, whereas now we all know it's probably the most important tool and we actually have to keep working ourselves on it, and we're probably more aware of our own communication. I would agree with that 100%. Like Dan, is thinking so much more about how he communicates. I think more about how I communicate. The girls think more as well. And it's only because of what we've all been doing to realise that this is the key to our longevity or our ability, as you say, to really drive that business forward. And as we say, we're not saying we've got it right. It's a work in progress. It's a long journey and we've just got to keep working on it.
Well, if that's the most important thing, and if you talk to most families, it's their legacy. It's that we achieve something, we build something that we're proud of and we do what we enjoy. We love the land, we love farming. But then it's also, you talk to the families and go, well, what happens if you get to 70 and all of a sudden your kids hate each other, they hate you, it all falls apart? What have you just done the last 30, 40, 50 years for? What's the reason you're doing this? And so for most people, they go, it's because of my family and I want to provide for myself and my family and leave a legacy. Well, this is what needs to be done if you want to do it. The stats are clear, the results are clear. This is what people have got to do. But so many people just aren't willing to do that hard yards for various reasons. And most of the time it's because it's just an extra job. And so that leads me into the fact, Karen, that, for the last 12 or so months, we've been working pretty hard on, there's 4 key areas, and that was developing a strategic roadmap that all the family was involved in. So we can say, well, what are our values? Where are we going? What's the way we're going to conduct ourselves? What's the 10-year plan, etc. And everyone was involved in that, which meant everyone was aligned, as you mentioned. But we even involved Tom, which at that stage was your soon-to-be son-in-law, which was incredibly brave, or a lot of people would think would be incredibly brave, but I think it's essential. We've also been doing family meetings that were more focused on strategic discussions and family discussions rather than just day-to-day operations. When are we going to move those cattle to this block? Should we buy a new feed mixer? We've been working on family alignment, keeping getting everyone on the same page and communicating and building those skills, but also then bringing your professional advisors together, like your bank manager, accountant, explaining to them what the roadmap is, getting them on the same page, and then exposing the next generation, the girls, to interacting with those people and building that vocabulary. So we've essentially been on this plan of sort of preparing you and Dan to think about the next phase of your life, because although I'm sure Dan wouldn't want to say it, eventually we have to retire. We've got to prepare the business to be able to be succeeded over to the next generation. And you also got to prepare the girls, prepare the next generation. Now, you're 5 to 15 years, depending on what day you speak to Dan, from this whole succession. What prompted you to actually take on a project like this when you got so many other things on the go at the moment, like with the farm and buying more blocks of land and expanding and bringing the girls back in and a new grandchild and Tom coming into the family? And how the hell did you get Dan on board?
The reason we sort of, came to work with you, Ben, I suppose we'd driven our business. We've been buying land and doing lots of things so far. And as we said, structures, we've always worked very well with our accountant and our bank manager. We've always had a fantastic relationship with them. We've had the girls involved with bank meetings even the last few years. So we were already doing a lot of the things that, we've worked through you with. But for us, the big point was that we're at the stage where the girls are about to, take on relationships. So we're about to go into that phase of, expanding. And let's be blunt, as everyone says, you have 4 girls, as if it's going to happen, how are you going to do it with 4 girls? And we said, well, we don't have the answers. Ben, we still don't have the answers. But we've got a plan of, how we can keep growing our business, and then through communicating, work out which is the best way to eventually transition our business to the girls. So we just got to the point where, as we said, we did involve Tom at our very first meeting, and that was a conscious decision, because we know that obviously there's, other young lads around about. We don't want to see that we made any decisions against someone or because of someone. So we were very conscious to have the first one that Tom was involved, because we're not trying to make this hard for anyone. We're not up to trying to make secrets or traps, or we don't want to make anyone feel ostracised. So as much as we want to know where we're going, it was really important for me also to know, what Tom was thinking. So going forward, it's really important that you know what any other potential partners are thinking. So we sort of wanted to establish a very strong base that this is sort of what we do as a family. So if you come in, these are our actions, this is what we do, this is how we run our business, so that we can bring people, partners into the business or out of the business. And we've got a structure that's hopefully, solid, that there's sort of a formality to it. It's not just hodgepodge that one day it's random. And because it is for girls, because girls will all, you hope they all find lovely partners in life, we wanted to start that process prior to that. So that's why for us it was a priority. Dan was hard to actually get to come away, to leave the farm. That's the biggest challenge there. We had a couple of dates to try to actually get together. We had to have a few, first off the block starts.
He's pretty wary of me too. I go, I'm investing my time that I could be back on the farm. I've got plenty of jobs to do. What the bloody hell am I here for?
Yeah, it was a tough ask, but, give him credit. He, as you say, it's not a traditional man thing to do, Ben, let's just face it. Like, it's not a blokey thing to go, I'm going to go and sit with another bloke and we're going to talk about our business. Well, no, I just want to get on with it. But it was huge, and it has been a massive learning journey, and it's been enlightening for each of us to reflect on our own thoughts. So it has been really powerful, and by no means was Dan ever against it, because he is definitely the one that wants to grow the business with the girls. He wants to succeed. He wants to be there to watch them have a go. He said, I don't want to control this forever. I want to see what they can achieve. They're amazing young ladies. They will just dig deep, and then they'll dig harder and they'll dig harder. So he was never against it. It was just a matter of is this really the right process, and what are we doing? And,
Well, it's taking time away. I mean, that's what I find for most blokes. And I'm like that. When Sarah comes home to me and says we're going to do something, I look at my watch and I go, well, I've got all these things to do. Is this going to be the best use of my time? And a good entrepreneur and a good business owner and someone driving the business needs to think like that. Where's the best allocation of my time? So I totally get it. And it's quite often, and what I usually find, Karen, is it's usually, and stereotypically it's usually mum popping their head up saying, hey, we need to start formalising this. We need to start having discussions before, as you said, before partners come along, who's coming back, where are we going? But the one thing that I noticed, which was really, really cool, was, we're setting that 10-year goal for the family, the 5, 10 and 1 year goals, and really getting clear on those, and everyone agreeing and being on the same page is like electric, isn't it? Because then all of a sudden it's almost like a hunting dog, in the sense that you go, there's the stag, go get it. And that's what everyone did. And what I noticed, you guys kicked off, I think it was your 5-year goals within 3 months. Not all of them, but some of the big ones that as soon as you got clarity of vision and everyone was on the same page and you knew there are number one priorities in the next 3 to 5 years, it was amazing how all of a sudden we manifested a result in such a short period of time. And I remember you and I going, holy shit, what are we going to do now? This is a new problem now.
Yeah, but it was an amazing process. Also, amazingly was, questions that we had beforehand. And I do distinctly remember you sort of said, I can help Dan do them. And I said, no, I need to know what's in his head. So I'm not sure if there's many other ladies out there that go, I don't get what's in their head. So it's really powerful to get inside their head. You might be married to them, spend all this time with them, do business with them. But when you pose questions to everyone, and we did consciously all do it individually because all of us wanted to know what was in each other's head. So it was like no one was prepared to share until we were put in that space, because we didn't want to influence anyone else's thoughts. And it was incredibly powerful amongst our crew that we nearly all had the same things written down page after page. It was mind-boggling. Yet, we made a conscious effort that no one, honestly, we didn't even think Dan had answered them. So there you go. He came a long way.
He did. And I give Dan his due. He stepped up to the plate and he was just as prepared as everyone else. And to be frank, I've seen families come in where dad's just done nothing. It's dug their heels in and gone, oh, what am I here for? Whereas Dan, he was like, once he made the decision, he was boots and all in, and he'd done all his homework and he knew where he wanted to go, and he tried to get it out on paper and did a really good job of it. And that made such a difference for the family. It's amazing. And the one thing I noticed with you and Dan, and dealing with many, many families over the years, is you can just really see how you've got this sort of clearish vision of the future, because nobody knows exactly what's going to happen in the future, but it's clearish. And what it is we've got to set ourselves up for a financially secure retirement. So we're going to look after ourselves. We've also got to look after the business, because we're passionate about feeding the world, as you said, with the Four Daughters brand and the feedlots, and et cetera. And then you've got to set up the next generation to succeed as well. And we're all working together to be able to achieve those goals. And there's real clarity. And it was fascinating. I spoke to a young guy who I interviewed on Tuesday who's went through a failed succession. And he said, I was in my early 20s, mid-20s. And he said, the biggest thing missing from me was clarity. Mum and dad wouldn't tell me what was going to go on in the future. I had no understanding of what was happening, and I was so frustrated that I couldn't see a picture. I was driven and motivated. And I feel like in a lot of families, there are the next generation coming through and they feel frustration that they're not getting clarity of the future. Now, to back mum and dad up, a lot of the time, mum and dad don't really know themselves, or it's in their head and they thought they've told them, but it hasn't really come through. So, Karen, what I'd like to say is essentially my advice to most families is, and I was having this discussion with a bunch of accountants the other day dealing with these problems, is once you're getting to 65, 70, 75, and you're hitting that succession point, that's when a lot of families actually take action. So they go, we're at that point now. Kids are usually in their early to mid-30s, maybe a bit later. Mum and dad are there. Whereas my personal opinion is that's where all the problems kick in, and that's where you need far more help. That's where you need mediators, facilitators, and then sometimes lawyers come in, and then family relationships break down. And if you leave it till then, you're far more likely to end up with a problem. Now, that might be a financial problem, an alignment problem, relationships, etc. My idea is succession should just be starting from the day the kids are born. But as a second thing, it should be 45 to 55 is that real sweet spot for what I call succession preparation. Getting yourself set up, driving the business forward, getting aligned, preparing the next generation. Now, if you're talking to other mums and dads that are like that 45 to 55 roughly, and they've got young men and women starting to come back to the farm, starting to get partners, sort of similar age to where you are, what would you say to them if you were sitting in front of a room full of them right now?
Don't ignore the challenges ahead and don't ignore what's going on around you. Just be realistic that in 20 years' time, we will be dealing with, it's called inheritance. And the reality is agriculture and the value that we all have sitting in assets now is, next level. There mightn't be money in the bank. It's the same thing. Our business partners are our bank. But at the end of the day, children will see there is an inheritance if that's 20 years' time. So you can ignore it and then have the potential shit fight at the end, and goodness knows what happens and it could all be lost. or you can start to engage them and help them build the inheritance. Basically, I suppose that's where we're at. Like, we can pull together and you can grow this together and, technically your inheritance pie will be bigger. So, I think face reality. There will be inheritance later on. Talk about it. Don't ignore it. Like, find out what they do want to do, whether, if they're interested in the land, good day, bring them on board. And if they're not, how are you going to deal with that? Because they're having those thoughts anyhow. Like, even if they're young, there's so much going on and they see that there's all these assets that are worth money. So if I leave, what does that mean? Just start talking. We don't have the answers, but just that first part. Don't ignore it. Face it and have the communication.
Well, it's only going to get harder, as you alluded to, Karen, as well, with once they start to partner up and then you bring another person in who hasn't been raised with your values or your understanding of the family dynamics, and they have children and their center of the world becomes them and their partner and their children. All of a sudden, then the influence over them that you have, or the ability to shape the way the family relationships are, become exponentially more difficult.
Yeah. And look, I think the same thing, all of this, there is no one answer. There is no right way. Until you know what your family's after, you don't really know. And look, Ben, honestly, the same thing. You really do need an outside person to help pull those things out and have those conversations, because none of them are easy conversations at all. So I think just, start little, start with something, just embrace it. I think our two biggest things I think that we've really gained is, yes, the importance of communication. We've gone there, but also a whole lot of clarity about the difference between operations and strategic planning. Like, farmers live in operations. We're out there every day, get this done, get this done, get this done. And I can't fit that meeting in because things have got to happen, and they do have to happen. We've tried to have meetings. Trucks are booked. Then all of a sudden it has rain and the spraying has to happen. So operations, yes, technically, everything has to be done on the farm. So we've learned a lot about really understanding the difference between operations and strategic. That's probably been one of our biggest take-homes as well. And that's saying not just Dan and myself, that's actually the girls. So, they're sort of now trying to run a monthly operations plan sitting beside our strategic plan, and then looking then at when do we need to bring staff in and who do we need. And we're really, at the end of the day, Dan still is boss man. There's no doubt about that. However, the girls are all running different sections and, put that operations plan beside the strategic plan. So we've got that, longer term goals, where do we want to go? And it's understanding that day-to-day operations it's sitting there. They work alongside each other. So that was a really big thing, I think, for any farmer, is to understand, even when we're talking all of this, yep, you've still got your business, you've still got to get out every day and you've got to do the work to make the money come in. Otherwise, we've all got nothing anyhow. But if you're going to do all that hard work for that money, how are you actually going to manage this long term? So, everyone knows we all get out of bed. We all know the drudgery. We know the hard work and the yakka, but how do we manage it? So that's the bit that's easy to ignore, actually. That's the bit you can go, I'll deal with it later. So that, I suppose, for us has been that last 12 months that let's really now start, because of the age of the girls and because of, starting to growing families, that we've really now got to make that a priority. As you say, we said 10 years, Ben, we're down to 9 years. So how quickly those years are ticking past. And we don't have the answers, but we've got some skills and some knowledge to keep working through those next, say, 9 years, to help us be in a position to make clearer transitions and make it transitions that hopefully work in the best interests of all of the girls and their future families, whoever they are and wherever they may be.
And if I can be blunt too, Karen, the reason I asked you the question of where do you fit into all this, Adele, my offsider, I call her my director of getting shit done. I think that's your job within the business, as the director of getting shit done. And what I notice with you do is you work with everyone, you wrangle everyone together, and then you make sure things get done. And I think if I look across most successful families in the business, there is a strong patriarch, a strong matriarch who are leading the family. But generally there's one of those are the people that get shit done on farm, and then there's one that has to get all that strategic planning, all those things that aren't moving cattle around, etc. And that's where quite often mums fall into that category. Not always, but quite often. And then I can tell you right now, Karen, that's where I see your real, not the only thing you do, but one of the real values is meetings happen, everyone attends. When you say you're going to do something, Karen says it's going to happen. So that's what I love. Now, as we end this up, 10-year plan, I know we're to 9 years, but if you could paint me a picture of what the perfect outcome might happen to be now that Wally's on the ground 10 years from now for you and Dan.
Yeah, look, you do whole laps of thought processes, but again, in 10 years' time, ideally the girls are probably that age that we were talking about that Dan and I, took on our boat journey. So would love to see that we've still all family number one. I'd love to see that the girls are still, each other's best buddies along with their respective families, that grandchildren get to spend, cousins get to spend quality time with each other, that everyone still values family first, but then that we have been able to transition different land assets, different business structures across to the girls. As we say, we don't know how that will look yet, and that's an evolving thing as our next 9 years do go past. But ideally, we transition across to all 4 girls very much in control of driving their own destinies for their own families. We've, as much as we said we had a challenge with our first succession, we've also had the privilege of, it might have been tough and hard, but we also had that privilege to have a go on our own, and we value that greatly. And because of that, I suppose we're very aware that we've got 4 girls who are all very driven, all have strong personalities, so they can all be successful alone. They could choose to stay together and be more successful together. We want structures that choice allows them to make their decisions themselves, Maybe we'll all go 4 ways. Maybe it could go 3 and 1. Maybe people might choose to run businesses together. We've just learned so much about even running business, Ben. As we say, it doesn't all mean we're in operations. It could be, we've talked about lots of different ways it could unfold, and that will all depend on future relationships that we say, 4 girls, we don't know how this will go. And I think regardless even of the 4 sons, it's the same thing. As soon as you bring in partners, there's a shift in dynamics. There's no point denying that. And we don't know how those dynamics will go, but it's about having that communication and structures in place to make the best choices we can. So hopefully in 10 years, everyone's still loving living on the land.
Isn't it funny, Karen? I was only reflecting. I had a meeting with someone this morning, a family meeting, and I was going back and reflecting all their wins for every month for the last 12 months. And I think I worked out 80% of their massive wins for the month, because we always celebrate the wins, were all non-business related. And so what that highlights to me is, in asking you that question, is there's business goals in there, but the real gold and the reason for doing everything is based in those non-business things, which is family relationships, fun, adventure, fulfillment, having, the gift of giving the next generation a go. I think that's beautiful. And I can see that you and Dan and the girls are all in that boat, all working together. And it's clear to me that even when you hit the roadblocks, that's not a reason to fold and just go back to what you were doing before. You're continually curiously looking at ways to be able to fix things. So, I'm very excited to see what happens over the next 10 years, Karen.
Mystery tour continues. I call life a mystery tour. So, we're on it. We've been up a few dry gullies and backed out again. But, hopefully, mystery tour keeps going and we can continue to, love living where we live and produce food and breed another generation of passionate food producers.
Love it, Karen. Excellent. Well, look, thanks very much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I know everyone loves to hear these stories, but also hear what they need to do to be successful long term. And I know it's hard to talk about family things for a lot of people, so I really appreciate you opening up. And as I said, look forward to the next 10 years.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate the chat.
Well, there was some gold in that episode today. I really enjoyed that. They're a great family. And if you don't know who they are, go to social media. Instagram is probably the best place to go. Check out 4 Daughters Beef. And what I can tell you is behind the scenes is exactly the same as what you see online. Now, as it always happens with these sorts of things, is we finish recording, we have a debrief, and then all of a sudden someone comes up and says, I forgot this part, which is really important. And so Karen said to me, she said, Ben, one thing I missed was that when you talked about what are we going to do in 10 years' time, and I think it's a really important point, is we don't want to stay and control everything. So she said, Dan's not going to go off farm and live on the beach. He's not interested in doing that. His mum's still on the farm at 90. He wants to stay on the farm for as long as he possibly can. But he said, I don't want to stay in control. I want to stay in support. So the idea is to give them their absolute go, the next generation, and not control what's happening later on, which is a really big distinction for many families, because some say they want a succession plan, but that they want to control things once they've retired. And I just like to clarify my key point after that, which I'd written down, is it's a real gift to give your children, so the next generation, clarity. Really important point, clarity of where you're going in the future so that there's not any misapprehension, but there's also some beauty in the gift of giving them a go. The amount of young men I see, less women, but more young men, they say to me, when am I just going to get my go, Ben? There's this fire in their belly to have a crack themselves. And many families leave that until their late 30s, early 40s. and then things change. You need to be getting them to have a crack in some way, shape or form, whether that's be, help support them into their own off-farm business, drive it, have a construction business or earth moving or drive a truck, or get their own cattle herd they're building up, or actually take a farm management role on one of the properties, whatever it might be. The gift of giving them a go is really important. And Dan and Karen are very, very, very much on that page. They want to stay and support, not control, which was really good. Now, for mums and dads out there, I just want to hammer home again about that 45 to 55 mark. That's when you need to be investing all your time in this, because I can guarantee you very few families will succeed, or it won't be an easy process when you get to retirement and then have to do succession plan. It's going to erode family relationships and lose wealth. Always happens that way. Now, what I can tell you unequivocally of the people that I've interviewed and many that I've worked with over the years, for the people that I've interviewed, I can tell you the Lord family, who I interviewed at Beef Week, and a number of others, which if you haven't heard them, go back and listen to them. They're a cracker of an episode. I interviewed the Lorries at the conference, and also to now the Penfolds. They all have done this preparing for succession phase, which is, again, just to reiterate, 5 to 15 years before succession actually, or the transaction goes through where mum and dad retire or transition out of the business and the next generation trends into full-time ownership. I can't stress that enough. And Tony Robbins, I remember years ago, said to me, one of the most successful personal development people ever, find what the successful people are doing that are successful in the world that you want to be successful in and model them. I can tell you right now, this is what they're doing. They're preparing themselves for their next journey, the next phase of their lives. They're driving the business forward. So they're preparing the business and the structures, etc., to make it succeed when they hand on. But they're also preparing the next generation. And that needs time. It's the apprenticeship. It's the going through those phases. Really, really important. Now, if you're in your 20s and you weren't lucky enough to be born into someone like the Penfold family that are having these conversations and driving this sort of thing forward, I get the frustrations you're probably going to have. And maybe even for some of you in your 30s. What I'd suggest is sometimes you just can't change other people in the situation. You can only change yourself. Work on yourself. Build your communication skills. Strengthen your mindset and build the skills that you need to be successful in life, and then try and bring the family on for the journey. For the mums and dads who are in the stage where they've got younger children coming through, and when I say children, I mean adult children in their early 20s, the common statement from them is, it's a bit early. They're not really interested. They don't know where they want to go. I call bullshit. You need to sit them down regularly and have a conversation with them about the future. Start to paint them a picture. And even if you don't have all the answers, I get it's scary, but sit down with them and start to have the conversations and have them regularly, whether that be once a year or whether it be once every 6 months, every 3 months, whatever it is. But sit them all down and have those conversations and start learning those skills. Because remember, high-performing families aren't born, they're built. And if you listen to Karen today, you can see that they're not always getting everything right, but they're focused on continually improving things and driving things forward and getting better and learning the skills. And they're not just focusing on the operational side. So that's my 2 bobs worth. Love the episode with Karen. Grateful for her. If you think this is valuable, we'd love it if you could share it with your family and friends out there. I think more people listen to these stories, the better. Number 2, if you liked it, give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. That helps the algorithms get the message out to more people. And if you've got any questions, drop me an email, admin@thefinancialbloke.com.au, and I always reply to those emails. So that's it for this time. Speak to you in 2 weeks.